Hi, my name is Glenn Silverberg. I'm a senior developer with Prolifix. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how a Panther application can be integrated with .NET. Panther does not support .NET directly, since a Panther application does not run in the .NET managed environment. Panther applications cannot run in .NET managed environments since they are not written in a common language runtime language. However, since Panther can act as a COM client, we can use COM interop techniques for a .NET assembly in order to expose an assembly DLL as a COM component that can be consumed by Panther. So what we're looking at on the screen is the Panther editor with a Panther client sample screen. The screen has 4 buttons on it. Each of these buttons has a function implemented in JPL associated with it. So the JPL is here. What we're doing is using Panther's COM support. Panther can act as a COM client. And the very first thing we need to do is to tell Panther that the methods we're going to call to create objects are going to be COM objects. So we set the current component system property of the application to pv_server_com. So the button called create pan sample calls this function, which just calls the Panther smobj create function to create the greeting sample object. And then further down, if it's successful, we install an event handler for an event called SumEvent, and the handler is going to be a JPL function that's in this module called onSumEvent. The second button, called greeting methods, calls 2 methods. They're right here. Use smobj call to call the getGreeting method to display the result in a message box. Then we call the second method called getCustomGreeting. This one takes a single argument, pass in the argument, and it also returns a string which is displayed in a message box. The third button, which is labeled trigger event here, calls this JPL function called trigger_event, and this calls another method which is in the assembly called doSomething. doSomething is then going to invoke the event, and when that happens, the event handler that we've installed, which is this JPL function onSumEvent, is going to be called. So trigger event calls a method in the assembly called doSomething, which triggers the SumEvent event, which then invokes the JPL handler. So the JPL handler is a callback function, and it's called from the assembly. And this function is expecting to receive a second parameter which is called args. And we're expecting that it has these 2 properties, event code and event time. And those are going to be pulled out and displayed in a message box. And then we delete the args argument since it's an object. And the last button on the screen, delete pan sample, just deletes the object we created with the create pan sample. So that's the client, and if I were to run it right now, it won't work, because right now I don't have the object registered. So COM doesn't know about it at this point, so we get this COM error from Panther. Now let's take a look at the C# code that's used to implement the assembly. So here's my pan sample application. It's written in C#. We could have used a different language. We use C# for convenience. And there's actually a lot in here that I'm not going to fully explain. But we have annotations that are somewhat complex to explain, but I will show you one important thing about this sample is that the properties for this need to be configured so that the assembly can be used from COM. So I did not specify to register for COM interrupt. That simply registers it when you do the build from the Visual Studio. This, by the way, is Visual Studio 2005. However, you can get this project from Prolifics, and if you do, you can use it with a later version of Visual Studio, and you can migrate it up to the latest version of Visual Studio. It's not that's been done. It's not difficult to do. It's you just tell Visual Studio just migrate it, and it just works. So the important thing to set in here under assembly information is this checkbox, make assembly COM visible. That allows the assembly to be used by both COM and by .NET. So going back to the, some of this can also be done simply through the annotations that are in front of some of these methods. For just the two function methods that we saw, get greeting and get custom greeting, it's really quite simple. Here's the greeting class. It implements this interface. It's _greeting, and I'll show you that. _greeting is very important to have this interface, and the interface is exposed so that Panther can reference it. So it has three methods in it, the three that we talked about earlier: get greeting, get custom greeting, and do something. And here's get greeting, just does hello Panther. Get custom greeting takes an argument, which you saw from the JPL. I was passing in my name Glenn, so it should say hello Glenn. And do something is the method that gets called to trigger the event. And here's where we, first we create an object called SomeEventArgs to hold the event code and the event time properties. We pass that into the event handler by firing the event and passing it as a second argument. Panther can then receive this object and use its functions to get properties from COM objects to get the two values that have been placed in the SomeEventArgs object. Here's the definition of SomeEventArgs, where we define the two properties, event code and event time, with default getters and setters. So there's actually, didn't explain that right, this is the interface for it, and then the object itself implements the _SomeEventArgs interface, and here are the getters, the get set for each of those properties. Note that they are both strings because they have to be a type that Panther can work with. So if we returned some class that Panther doesn't know anything about, then we would not be able to put the return values into JPL variables and do something useful with them in the Panther client. So that's basically it for this code. We can compile this. Let's change the default for this so we know we made a change. We'll say hello there for the get custom greeting. We can then, I'll just build and sample here. You can see here that it succeeded. It's up to date, 0 failed, 0 skipped. We notice that the DLL is in the project place where the project lives. And what we would do is make a copy of this path, and to register this DLL for COM, you could have used the option that I showed in the properties earlier, but we can also use a utility called RegASM, which comes with Visual Studio. So we want to run a command prompt as administrator. It's a Visual Studio 2005 command prompt. And then we can go to the directory where the DLL was built. DLL was built November 1st at 3:52, which is 2 minutes ago. From a previous run, there's already a type library here, but we're going to generate a new one. We can actually just delete this one. And the command we're going to use to register the assembly and produce the type library is RegASM codebase argument tells it to use the local copy that's right here rather than put the assembly into the global cache. It just uses it directly from this location. Tell it that we need a type library. And do that. Oops, typed that wrong. The PDB file that we see in here is just the debug information for the debugger. So here's our type library, and hopefully it's now been registered, and we should now be able to run the greeting sample. So we'll create the object. This time it's successful. A message that says that we've installed the COM event handler for some event. And now we can call the two methods. First one, hello Panther. The second one, hello there Glenn. So you saw that I changed it. If you download this sample, it'll just show hello Glenn. The third button triggers the event, and we see that the event code is 5. That was hard coded, and I'll show you that again in the source code, the C# code. And here's the timestamp, which was converted to a string because we need a string for Panther. Let's take a quick look again at that code. So to do something, we put just hard-coded 5 for the event code. And here you can see we're converting datetime to a string so that Panther can handle it. And finally, we would delete the sample object, the greeting object, when we're done. that's basically the entire demo. One other thing I can show is that the sample can also be used as a .NET assembly. I have a project which is already in here called console application. It has some very simple code in it, creates the new greeting object, and invokes the getGreeting method and writes it on the command line. And let's see, I had previously started a command prompt. This is the one right here, which is in the directory for console application 1. And there's actually an older pan sample in here from a previous build. We just copy it in here so that the executable can access it, knows where to find it. And if we run console application 1, it calls the getGreeting method, hello Panther. That's it for this demo. Thank you very much for your patience.